Welcome to the Spiridion Advantage video podcast. I'm your host, Greg Turner, Managing Director for Spiridion's Innovation and Strategy Center of Excellence. We are going to discuss accelerating SAP CRM replacement with automation, specifically how Spiridion and our partner Conemis can assist our clients with data migration. Helping me to discuss the solution is Mr. Daniel Rowley, CEO of Conemis AG. Conemis enables continuous modernization for our clients with the automated transition from legacy to cutting-edge software applications, such as Salesforce, for example. Welcome, Daniel. Thank you for attending.
Thank you for having me, Greg. It's great to be here. I look forward to our conversation and to sharing my views with the Spiridion audience.
Yeah, so Daniel, let's dive right in then. Why don't you tell me a little bit more about Conemis and for what systems does Conemis tooling work?
If we look at the client, how it has developed over the years, it's certainly much easier for customers these days to actually get new systems available to them. It's not about procuring servers anymore and installing software. It's readily available for customers, but what really remains challenging is to bring change, to get the right processes set up in the new application. And certainly data migration is one of the big challenges that has actually gotten harder with the cloud, since you're moving from on-prem, typically SQL databases or some kind of storage, to the new world, which all goes through APIs. So that's one of the main challenges we are seeing and we are addressing as Conemis. So we have started with really focusing on making the data migration easier, and data migration not only in terms of conversion, but actually the whole process of taking the data out of old applications, consolidating it and moving it to the new applications. But we are also supporting the assessment of the old applications to help customers identify what is actually in their old systems, what has grown there over the years in terms of customizations, in terms of the data that's residing in applications and systems, and what is actually relevant for the new world and for the new set of cloud applications that they are looking to enable and leverage for them. And also managing that whole process. So that's what Conemis is all about. And we are focusing on making customers successful on their journey, giving them the mental space to be successful in this complex world and fast-paced world of cloud implementations. What we have always been focusing on here in terms of systems is CRM CX. That's our origin, so customer relationship management software and customer experience software. That's always been what we've been focusing on. We're also supporting some other systems like PIM and any kind of databases that may be part of the overall process. But with this, certainly SAP CRM, that's in the core of what we're doing, serving customers to understand what they have in SAP CRM, what's relevant there, how to get the data out of the system, how to manage the whole transformation process into the new world, into new cloud applications like Salesforce or maybe other solutions like Microsoft or SAP C4C. We are supporting a whole range beyond that also. We are also supporting sources like Siebel or Microsoft that may be installed with some customers, and all of the major vendors on the destination side, including surrounding applications, sometimes for marketing and other purposes.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you, Daniel. And it's very interesting the way you kind of laid that out. But it begs a couple of questions. And so, as you talked about, on-prem to cloud, and, that introduces a lot of concerns sometimes for, CIOs and, CFOs, right, to recognize, where is the data stored through this data migration process with Conemis, and how is it protected while that process is going on?
Yeah, we do indeed work with very large customers who have very high standards in terms of data storage, data residency, protecting their data. And depending on what specific systems our software is serving in terms of extracting the data, there may be highly sensitive data in these systems, like personally identifiable information, PII, contracts, revenue numbers, even health-related data in some cases. So clearly, this is a very sensitive topics in these cases, and you do want to make sure that not only is the data stored in the right geography, but also that it won't get lost or compromised in the process. You want to make sure that you have control over the data, the process, and that you comply with standards such as GDPR as one example. And we see alternative approaches to Conemis that sometimes actually have data distributed across laptops in different locations. I've even heard rumors about customer data being sent by email between team members unencrypted, which is something we don't recommend. So we address all of that with the Conemis approach, and it starts with the architecture. So with Conemis, we do have all the data that's relevant for a project, everything that's being extracted and converted in the process, including data about the progress in the project itself, managing the different team members and progress in the project. It's all in one place. There's one home for all that data. Nothing floats around on any device or is being sent around by email. It's really one central place. And then, of course, it's crucial to secure that properly. So we encrypt data that's in the system. Everything is encrypted at rest in the data. It's, of course, encrypted during transfer from the source applications and transferring it to the destination. Also, all access is, of course, strictly defined, and we have clear processes for this. Everything is just on a need-to-know basis. There's full control on what team member sees which kind of information, and you can also see who accesses what. By default, we operate data centers in the US. Typically, that's what we use for US customers. We operate data centers in Europe, in Germany, one of the countries with the strongest data regulations. But we can also deploy the Conemis software actually on infrastructure that the customer wants. You would call it on-premise in the old world. Nowadays, it's typically a virtual machine or some infrastructure that they have from one of the major providers. They ask us to deploy the software on. So we have the ability to also do that. Or we can deploy on behalf of a customer in any country with a provider, one of the big infrastructure providers, any country that they support, we can also deploy there. The default is that we just use our own cloud out of our US data centers, fully set up and operated with all our security measures in place.
Well, that's interesting and very thorough. And so it sounds, based on your experience, based on, again, the many compliance models that you described, it sounds like Conemis has really thought of everything with respect to the encryption, the data protection, and the data management. As a former CIO, I've had experience with many projects, especially in data migration, where you think you got it fairly well set up and you know exactly how you're going to do it, but then you run into trouble. And I guess my question is, could companies start using the Conemis tooling solution in the middle of an implementation project, or do they have to start at the beginning?
The ideal scenario, of course, is to plan from the beginning, because then you can leverage all the benefits of accelerating the project and planning with an accelerated project plan from the beginning. Then you get the full benefits. But we know the world is not always ideal. And we do see that customers, especially in complex scenarios, especially if there's consolidation maybe from different sources, you cannot always plan everything up front. And we do see that in some cases, customers may start with a POC to see how things work, and they may choose an approach that's without Conemis first, or they may even try and in some cases fail with an alternative approach. Then it is possible to also bring in the Conemis software. We do have the three components, the three major components in the Conemis software. The first one being the assessment piece. This is something we do recommend to try early on, and you can, as a customer, work with this without even fully committing to all the components of the Conemis software, but you can see and feel what the software looks like, and you can benefit from that in an early assessment, maybe even before you plan everything out. And you can also bring that in once you've already started. So if you see that you need to dig deeper, need to dive deeper into what data is relevant, if you want to analyze the data, identify what is relevant for the overall process, you can always add that component later on. Then you do have the whole data migration element, the whole ETL element, which in the case of SAP CRM, for example, directly connects to SAP CRM. It directly can extract all the data, including the customizations, which for those who have tried before, they know it's not easy to get all the data without going into SAP and first of all, configuring it and exposing the right data, exposing the right APIs. There's no need for that. The Conemis software just connects to the SAP CRM instance and can get out all the data, can detect the whole data model, all customizations. So that is something you can also, if need be, add that during the project, because it does not depend on any previous configuration, exposing any APIs or anything. You can just add it on top, and you can even in parallel to maybe some other activities that have started, you can use that and define the scope. You can even say, okay, we have started with a few objects, with a few tables already. We have seen that it's very tedious. It takes a long time, but we need to continue the process for those in our traditional way. Let's add them as for the remaining data, for the remaining objects, remaining tables. We can do that. We can seamlessly add that. We can define the scope, the proper scope in the Conemis software, and just handle that data with the Conemis software. In some cases, maybe an additional system in a consolidation scenario. Maybe you want to consolidate different CRM systems from different geographies or different divisions. You can use Conemis for a later stage system that you're adding and work with that and extract the data and then consolidate it with the rest. So yeah, it's possible in that case. And I mean, the most severe scenario I can imagine is that you've really tried everything. You're just failing, maybe due to the performance overall. Then you can still bring in the data migration piece of Conemis and take mappings you've already defined, the logical, functional mappings and transformation rules, and basically just load them into Conemis, maybe convert and adjust them a little for the format, but then load them into Conemis and still benefit from the whole performance. So faster extraction from SAP, faster loading into Salesforce, and managing the whole process in between. So that's also possible. And the third component, which is the project performance, which actually gives you a live overview of what's happening. So if you're leveraging the Conemis component, you have this overview. There is live reporting on everything. This can only be leveraged if you have the migration component in place. So you cannot leverage that if you have an alternative approach of scripts or manual transformation of data or some kind of complex data integration software that you've configured. Then the project performance component does not really work. You need the migration component at least to make that work. So, I mean, we do recommend, if you can, check out the software and the capabilities early, maybe in a POC, or plan with it from the beginning. But if need be, you can add the components as I just described.
Sure.
On.
No, that's great. And, you know, and as I like to say, that's way cool, right? So that you give an option for our clients to be able to say, hey, you know, of course, starting anything from the beginning and planning it is always going to have a more desirable outcome than just dealing with something midstream. But, you know, the reality is the business world is dynamic. And some things, the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. And so, having a solution like Conemis that can be brought in at those various stages really does provide a lot of value and a lot of differentiation in this area. And what I like about everything is, I'm kind of summarizing a couple things here, Daniel, is that it's a secure solution. It can be used really at any time in the process of migration. And you've alluded to some of the things that I think will create acceleration of the data migration. But, could you explain a little bit more about how Conemis tooling accelerates data migration?
Yeah, if we look at the project life cycle, typically you have assessment, oftentimes even before the big plan is made and the decision is taken sometimes to go through the transformation to replace old applications, to replace an SAP CRM system, Siebel, or any other application. So assessment is an early step. And in the whole life cycle, we often see it more than once. So you have it initially, and with the assessment, the alternative would be to actually go into the legacy applications, to have experts who really know these systems well. Ideally, you would have them with the customer, but oftentimes not everyone who has contributed to customizing and building those old applications over time is still available, and they are not always part of the project team. So you have typically consultants going into these systems, manually digging through what's in there, trying to identify what's relevant, somehow generating some reports on what's there, and can then be discussed with the customer. So this is a weeks long effort, typically sometimes months, to collect that information and go through workshops with the customer. This element is already highly accelerated by Conemis, because we truly, if we look at SAP CRM or other systems like Siebel, Microsoft, etc., it's a one-click effort to scan the applications that exist, and we scan the customizations, the data, insight into the data, so you really have a comprehensive overview of what's in your old application or applications, if you have several of them in a project. And it's a one-click thing. It takes a few hours, depending on how big and complex the old applications are. It takes a few hours to process, but then you have this, and it's already well presented in the UI, so there's no need for anyone to put together slides. Maybe there will be some introductory slides for a workshop, but you can actually look at it in the software. You can scope it in the software, so the customer can say, well, okay, I see this is an old test object we had that's not relevant for anything we'll be doing in the future. Don't keep it as part of the transformation. And so you can go through that in detail down to the field and pick list level and define it in the software. So that saves a lot of time in manually analyzing, defining, and also maintaining and managing that scope throughout the project, because it always changes. So that can be done in the software itself. That's one accelerator. And as I said, you sometimes have that before you start the project, and then for sure you have it once you kick off the project, because then you really need to go into the details and in detail define what's relevant, and then plan based on that how you set up and run the migration, different objects at different times, maybe divided by different divisions or geographies or countries. So that's one element. Then, if looking especially at the SAP CRM case, it's not easy to get all the data out of an SAP CRM system. Really being able to access everything, including the Z or Z tables, depending on where people listen to us around the globe. There's a lot of customization typically in an SAP CRM system, and getting that data typically takes programming or exposing APIs in SAP CRM. We work around that. We can actually access all of that information with the connector that we already have pre-built with the Conemis software. So we can access all that data. We can see all the customization right away, And the best thing is we can directly start exporting all of the data out of SAP CRM. So that's also a big time saver. No one has to define any exports in SAP CRM, manually transfer files or anything. We can directly connect and pull the data out of SAP CRM at a very high performance. So literally in the first workshop with a customer, we can start extracting SAP CRM data the first day, and that's very impressive for most customers who have been fighting with those systems for a while already. And from then on, it goes smoothly through the Connemis software. So every step from there, from the extraction, is managed by the software. So all the transformation and literally every element, there's no need for any consultant to manually go through a file to replace something or to transform something. It's all managed by the software. And then the loading into the destination, be it Salesforce, be it a Microsoft system or an SAP system, it's also performance optimized. So there are also connectors available with the Connemis software out of the box that are performance optimized for loading. So this brings you just the performance overall. I mean, we're working with customers with hundreds of millions of records per instance, and the performance is stellar. But what really brings a big chunk of acceleration on top of that systematically in projects is once things are properly tested. You always need to test it with complex transformations, complex migrations, consolidations. You have to test, of course. And you have to retry things. You will run into errors. They are automatically analyzed by the Connemis software. So you don't have to open any log file at all. You don't have to dig through log files if you run into errors, if you run into any kind of issues. The Connemis software automatically categorizes them and shows them in the UI, and even gives advice, some basic advice on how to solve the issues. And then you can rerun it. You can rerun it in the software. You also don't have to take individual records out and upload them somewhere again and wait for the results. The Connemis software will automatically just take the fixed records, reload them into the system, give you the report live again. That's also an important factor. If you have large data volumes, millions of records, in some approaches, you load a batch, you have to wait until it's completed, then you get all the errors and you can process them. With Connemis, it's live. You start loading 10 million records, for example. You can watch for the first few thousand already. You can see, are there any reoccurring issues? And you can decide to maybe even stop the load, fix some issues, and then continue it, or let it run and then just rerun the issues. So the testing is already heavily supported by the software, makes it much faster, much easier and more comfortable for the project team, but also for the customer to understand when they have to contribute to fixing issues. It's much easier for them to understand those reports and error overviews that we are providing. And then once you have gone through all of that, once you have fixed all the issues, the great thing is you basically just point the Connemis software to the production system. So you have tested on a test system, and you point it to a production system, and you can be sure this is fully automated. So no one needs to rerun any manual steps, needs to process or copy any files. Everything is handled by the software, all transformations, all loading, all relationships setting in the new system, which is a big thing that we're automatically supporting, connecting the objects in the proper way. That's all happening automatically in the software. And this can just be pointed to production, and combined with the high performance, rollouts are much, much faster with the Connemis software, and they're fully automated. Of course, there needs to be someone to operate it, to watch it. You don't let it run blindly, but it can take up to, just depending on the complexity, a few days or a few hours. And then the software also supports automated delta loads for those who are really into the depths of these things. For the experts listening today, even delta loads are automated then by the software. And synchronization, you can sync SAP CRM with the destination cloud applications automatically with the Connemis software. So all of these automation elements greatly speed up the process. And then the third component, again, the project performance, which gives you live insight into everything that's happening in the migration and the build of the customization. So the build in the new system, maybe Salesforce, you can see that with the Konami software. You can see new fields being added in the software, and you can see the progress, like what percentage of my account object, what percentage of records have already been successfully loaded, how many errors do I still have. The software can even show you what you can expect in remaining duration for these activities. So you have, at any point in time, you have a live report on what's going on in the project. You don't have to wait for, typically you have a weekly report that's on PowerPoint, and you have to rely on the team that every information has been combined and presented properly. This is live in the Konami software, so you can react very quickly as a project manager, both from Spiridion, the consulting team, and from the customer. They can watch on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. They can see how things are progressing. And if they see that the team gets stuck anywhere, if there's no progress in loading or even in setting the transformation rules, they can start a conversation and say, I see you're getting stuck here. How can we fix this? So you can take proactive conversations. You can have proactive conversations, can take measures proactively to solve issues, to collect information, and to get things moving again. So that's also, especially in complex migrations, that's a big factor in acceleration, to have this clear overview and share that with the whole team, so everyone knows where they stand and can make sure that they stay on track with the timelines.
Daniel, it kind of, lends itself a little bit to, in the old days, data migration was just a big black hole, right? We'd get a bunch of, programmers, developers, and we'd say, here's the file layouts and here's the record layouts and everything. And, go build me a program to extract, to map, to load into a new system. And then, you wouldn't be able to relate to what happened until after the fact, right? And then, and then there were errors, right? Always. And there was accuracy issues and everything else. And so you'd have to go all the way back and do that whole process over again. And so what I'm hearing through your technology and the accelerations that you have as part of the Konami tooling solution is the ability really to kind of model an agile methodology and to have interactive or sprints, if you will, to break up, the data migration, maybe by regional data, by, company divisional data, or by other complexities for the data migration, and to be able to refine that and work with the client's team that knows the data, right? And to work with Spiridion and Konami as an example to really, get that interaction correct, so that when you go to do the actual automation, it's going to be, complete, accurate, secured, and accelerated.
Absolutely. I think you're adding a great aspect here, namely that on top of the acceleration, the customer gets more flexibility. They can say, just as you mentioned, it's not one big black box, but they can say, even during the project, so I want to carve out this division, or I want to kind of postpone this set of objects, or I want to archive this. They have the insight. It's easier to understand because it's visualized everything. You can see all the elements, and then it's much easier to have a conversation with the customer, and you can say, okay, let's migrate this earlier. Let's take this to a later sprint or a later go live. Let's archive this. It's easier to understand that, and you remain more flexible. I will add, though, again, for the experts listening, data migration should never be completely agile, to be frank. So you should plan the big blocks up front, because yes, with the Konami software, you can be fully agile. But if you truly are fully agile and you change scope, let's say every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on how you have your sprints set up, you have a lot of effort still in communication. So you should find the right balance between remaining flexible, being able to adjust, but also plan to some extent in the data migration.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Daniel, kind of lastly, as part of our video podcast, I always ask my guests to leave some nuggets of information for our audience today. And so what I'm going to ask is maybe if you could give us some 3 takeaways that you want to share.
Sure. So the first one I would say is, looking at Spiridion Technologies and our long-standing relationship, I know that Spiridion Technologies is great at solving complex migration issues, making customers successful with transformation projects, providing on and offshore capabilities. So that certainly from my end is something that customers can feel really comfortable with when it comes to complex migrations, when it comes to SAP CRM replacements or others. So that's one thing I can really say in that context. The second one is something that's very near and dear to my heart. I have seen a lot of customers before they work with us go through what I call transformation trauma. So they have operated systems for many, many years. They've had their ups and downs with those systems, but they've been working after a while. And then they need to take that leap to the new world, to the cloud. And it all looks great at the beginning, and it is great. I can honestly say that from many, many projects I've seen. But the way to get there is challenging. And sometimes for those teams who have known their old systems, they can run into transformation trauma. And that's really what we are focused on and what we are all about, to avoid that transformation trauma. So automation, it's not just about efficiency, it's about making it smoother and freeing the mental space to truly innovate, to not get lost in the nitty-gritty details, but really keep the mental space to innovate. And that's the nugget from my end. So make sure you stay open-minded, make sure you keep enough mental space to truly innovate with your new application instead of just introducing the next similar one. And the third one for me would be, as a customer, what you can take away from all of this is, if you're working with Spiridion and Conemis, you can get all of that out of one hand. It's one team. We really work together smoothly as one team, and the customer can get all of these benefits from a project that they run with Spiridion Technologies and Conemis together.
Oh, that's outstanding. And thank you, Daniel, for the kind words about Spiridion. We really appreciate that. But thank you for being our guest today. I believe this session was extremely informative, and we really appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure, Greg. Thanks for inviting me today. And I really look forward to hearing feedback from people who listen to that. Reach out to Greg, reach out to me, reach out to Spiridion and Conemis. We are happy to continue the conversation.
And thank you to our audience. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Spiridion Advantage video podcast. For more information about Conemis, our partner, for more information about Spiridion Advantage and all the solutions that we have to offer, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at info@spiridion.com. And if you have some ideas about an upcoming video podcast, please contact us at info@spiridion.com. We'd be happy to discuss that. Thanks again, and have a great day.